In the shadows of history lies tales of unimaginable darkness. From the hidden atrocities to the sinister secrets buried by time. Join me, Rob Bradley, as we delve into the depths of humanity's dark past, uncovering the chilling stories that history hoped you'd forgotten.
Dark history.
Prepare yourselves for the macabre and the mysterious as we journey through tales of tyranny, betrayal, and bloodshed. Discover the forgotten massacres, the twisted minds of infamous villains, and the haunting echoes of crimes that shook the world. This isn't just history, this is dark history. Join me in the exploration of the darkest chapters of our past. Listen now on your preferred podcast provider, if you dare.
Welcome to Dead Time, a bonus part of the Dead podcast, where I will read stories or encounters that spill over from my previous episodes. Today, I will be reading encounters with the Hat Man. I hope y'all enjoy. Encounter number 1, the Hat Man. He's coming for me, and I need to get this out. A few nights ago, me and some friends decided to stay up all night to play some video games. It was a Friday, so we didn't have anything to do the next day. It was fun, and we had a good time. I did some more gaming and cleaned my apartment when I woke up. Night came, and I turned off all the lights. I couldn't sleep. It felt like I was being watched, not by someone, but by something. I decided I was going to watch some TV since I couldn't sleep. Walking through my bedroom door, I saw something. A man in the corner, about 6'4", almost no distinct features except a hat, very clearly a top hat, well kept too. It was dark, and I could barely see the rest of him. I quickly turned the light on, but still, I could feel his presence lurking, watching. I tried to shake the feeling. "I'm just tired," I said, as I slowly sat down. I watched TV, but don't even remember what I watched. I never gave the TV more than half of my attention. I couldn't stop thinking about him, like he was engraved into my eyelids. Eventually, morning came, and my buddy Tyler came over. He had stayed up with me and my other buddy, whom neither of us had heard from. We talked, and he said he couldn't sleep either. When I asked him why, he said, "Nothing, it's stupid." I don't know why, but I didn't push it. Stupid now that I think about it. After a while, I could still feel him watching, but as the day progressed, he felt further and further away. Tyler went home around 1 because he needed to pick up his wife from work and do some other things. Night slowly rolled around, and I felt him more and more again. I couldn't sleep. This time, it was worse. Not just unsettling. It was terrifying. I tried watching the TV again, but I saw him in the hallway that connects my room to the living room. This time, he wore a fedora. It had a dark red band, and his face had become more visible. His eyes held open, like it looked painful, like he hadn't ever closed them. His mouth was sewn shut, and his nose was long and sharp. I could hear his breathing, long, careful breaths. The TV was drowned out by it. I locked eyes with him. As I did, he tilted his head, at a 45-degree angle, and his mouth made a small smile, as if he was happy I had seen him. The longer I looked, the harder it was to blink. Eventually, my eyes started to water, and his smile only grew bigger. We stared until morning, and he faded again, but I could still hear his breathing, feel him watching. My eyes were sore and dry, but I could barely close them to blink. I sat alone that day. That was 2 nights ago. Last night is when I became even more concerned for my safety. Nighttime came, and the breathing got louder, and I looked for him, but nothing. I sat down with a sigh of relief almost. Then I felt it, his hand on my leg. Startled, I tried to move, but I couldn't. I looked over, and it was him. His hat was now the top hat from before, now covered in blood. He smiled, but the stitches on his mouth were gone, as if torn off. His yellow teeth sharpened to points. His hand felt burning yet cold, and it made the area touching it feel like when your foot goes to sleep and you try to move it. He was now fully visible. He wore a tattered suit with a half-torn tie. His pants matched the suit, and his arm and legs were longer than they should have been compared to his chest. His feet were long, and he wore black dress shoes. His breathing quickened throughout the night until he started taking raspy, painful breaths out of his mouth. The morning came, and I no longer saw him, but the breathing didn't cease, and his hand still felt there. As night approached, he began to talk to me. I can hear him telling me how my friends died, how it felt when he ate them, how it tasted. I'm scared. He's telling me that most people don't last this long, that no one makes it past the fourth night. I can feel his hand again. It's gripping my throat. I looked in the mirror, and you can see the burn marks of his fingers and the cuts of his nails on my back. I tried calling 911, but they just ended the call and said, "Don't call again. It's illegal to prank call the dispatch number." I can't get him out of my head. I can hear him. I feel him. He isn't real, right? It's 4 p.m., and I see him again. He's sitting next to me, smiling, telling me he's happy that I'm sharing my time with him. Please, if you read this, don't stay up at night. He is real, and he will come for you. It's getting hard to type, and I'm struggling to breathe. My eyes won't close, and I'm getting tired. This will be my last post here. Goodbye, everyone. The second encounter. I met the Hat Man. There was a series of murders on the nearby island, and I was supposed to meet with each one of the murderers. The trials had been decided, but I work for a publication that deals with true crime and the macabre, so I was on assignment to interview these people. The murders weren't connected in any way, except that they followed a similar motive. Each murderer was a mother, and each victim was one of their children. Because the murders were so close together and so viscerally disturbing, they were seen as great content for our budding publication. I'm going to present you with the transcripts of these interviews. Each interview was conducted in person at the state penitentiary. All of the interviewees have volunteered, and none have been coerced. I am no longer writing in the interest of my publication. I am writing in the interest of my life. I hope that by reading this, that one of you out there might help to bring some solution to all of this. Interview with Mary Hofstetter, 7/18/22. James. Hello, Mrs. Hofstetter. Thank you for meeting with me. I know it must be difficult. Mary. Don't call me Mrs. I'm no Mrs. James. Why shouldn't I call you Mrs.? Mary. You know exactly what I did. James. I know what the officials have told me. I know what the press has told me, but I want to know your story. Mary. My story? It's the same as you're going to hear from anyone else. I went on a psychotic break and killed my child. My husband won't speak to me, and neither will the rest of my family. I can't say I blame them. James. Mary? Can I call you Mary? Mary. That's fine. James. Mary, I have my suspicions that things aren't exactly how they should be. Forgive me for the conjecture, but I do not believe that a mother who has no previous criminal record or history of violence would be capable of killing her own child. I really want to hear your story. There must be something else to this. Tell me I'm not wrong. Mary. You're not exactly wrong. James. Then tell me, walk me through that evening. Mary. Okay. My husband was away at work. He worked late at some office job. I never really understood what he did. Something in finance, I think. Anyway, it was around 9 in the evening. Cody and me were watching cartoons, and he was eating some chicken nuggets I had put in the oven for him. James, what was the cartoon? Mary, SpongeBob. He was enjoying his chicken nuggets while I had a glass of Chardonnay. My husband was going to be home in a couple of hours, and I had planned for Cody to be in bed by the time he got home. I thought I saw someone in the kitchen, but it was just my imagination. James, hold on. Someone was in the kitchen? Mary, I told you it was my imagination. James, tell me what he looked like, please. Mary, he was tall, and he was wearing tattered clothes, an old charcoal suit, and he was wearing this hat on his head. He just stood there, in the kitchen. I asked Cody to look over at the kitchen, figuring that if he saw something, it must be something other than my mind playing tricks on me. But he didn't. He didn't see anything. That's how I know it was in my mind. But he stood there, and I tried to ignore him, but it felt like he was staring into me, like he wanted something from me. I got a call then. It was from my husband. Mary, sweetie, would you mind having some dinner cooked when I get home? I'm starving. Something like that. My plan was to heat up the lasagna from the night before and serve that to him. I had honestly had a couple of glasses of wine and didn't feel like preparing an entire meal. I dreaded going into that kitchen. I knew the man with the hat wasn't real, that I had nothing to be afraid of. Nevertheless, I could feel his presence. In other circumstances, it would have been good that I had gone back into the kitchen. I had left the oven on. Not this time, though. As I stood by the oven, the hat man whispered to me so many words, words that I was memorized by. I can think of no other way to describe it. Something inside me had changed. James, what did he say to you? Mary, I can't remember. James, can't remember or don't want to remember. Mary, my mind won't let me remember. I don't know. I don't know what he said. I promise. James, okay, then what happened? Mary, I told Cody that I had something to show him in the kitchen. James, okay, then what happened? Mary, I told Cody that I had something to show him in the kitchen, and I walked him over to the oven. My poor 2-year-old child. I forced him into the oven. He protested and screamed, Mommy, but it was no use. I was completely mesmerized and under the control of the Hat Man. James, the Hat Man from your imagination? Mary, I can think of no other answer. Mary, I managed to get him in the oven and forced the oven closed with my back. I shoved the door back each time he tried to pound his way out. I can still hear his terrible screams from the burning. Even with all his might, poor Cody had no chance of escaping. Finally, it ended, and he stopped moving. My husband got home later, and he asked me what the burning smell was. Still in that horrible state of mind, I told him that it was his lasagna waiting in the oven. I have never seen another human being so horrified in my entire life, and this was the man that I loved the most, that I still love the most. That he didn't kill me right then and there is mercy I know I didn't deserve, but he didn't. He only called the police and sat with me, crying, sobbing, and asking why. I had no answer for him. James. And what about the Hat Man? Mary, I saw him just one more time. As I was walking out of my own house in handcuffs, he was standing at the doorway, smiling. James, is there anything else you would like to say about what happened? Mary, only that I'm sorry. James, thank you for your time. End of interview. I sat in my hotel that evening, feeling a sense of loss where I thought accomplishment would be. I had no idea who this Hat Man was. I wanted to think it was the ramblings of a woman driven to insanity or an evil woman looking for an excuse, but it felt like more than that. I powered up my laptop and began to do some research. To my surprise, and honestly, my shame, considering my line of work, there was quite a bit on this Hat Man, a figure witnessed all around the world by people experiencing sleep paralysis or high on psychedelics and especially deliriums. Whole communities of people discussing the nature of this Hat Man, what he's capable of, arguing over whether he's real. There are some who believe that he's some kind of demon, and some believe he's an extraterrestrial of some kind. None of the accounts, at least none that I could find, attributed the Hat Man to any death other than the death of the person visited by the Hat Man. The most disturbing stories of the Hat Man revolved around him stealing the breath away from his victims. Those who survived encounters, if they are believed, often recalled the Hat Man deciding their fate at a time when they were close to death. My interview the next day was with Irene Flowers. I did not want to exert too much control over the interview, but I wanted to see if there was any connection, any at all, with this Hat Man. Interview with Irene Flowers, 7/19/22. James. Hello, Mrs. Flowers. Thank you for speaking with me. Irene. You can call me Irene. James. Thank you, Irene. Can you tell me what happened? Irene. What happened when? James. The night that your daughter died. Irene. You mean the night I murdered my daughter? James. If that's how you want to put it, I just want to hear your story. Irene. I can tell you what I'm supposed to say. What everyone thinks, that I drowned my baby in that bathtub because I'm some heartless evil bitch. James. I don't care what you're supposed to say. I care about what happened. Irene. You're not going to believe me. James. Try me. Irene. I was putting Cindy in the bath. I was sitting next to the tub, playing with her rubber ducky, washing her hair. Mom and daughter stuff. She was laughing, that beautiful laugh of hers, the laugh I'll never get to hear again. Then there was a knock on the door of the bathroom, a soft, Polite knock. I guess I wasn't thinking, so I instinctively answered the door, and there he was. James. There who was? Irene. The Hat Man. This man, with a tattered charcoal suit and a wide-brimmed hat. He looked over and smiled at my daughter, and I felt such a pain deep in my stomach then. The smile looked predatory, like he wanted to devour my poor, precious Cindy. But then the man said something to me. Well, he leaned over and whispered it to me. James. What did he say? Irene. I can't remember. I don't know. But everything changed then. I felt like I wasn't me anymore, and I shoved my daughter's face into the water. She struggled, but I kept her down. It felt like hours, but I know it could only have been a few minutes before she stopped moving. James. What did you do then? Irene. I looked around for the Hat Man, but he wasn't there. I had done it. I had murdered my daughter, so I called the police on myself. I couldn't live with myself as a mother if I hadn't turned myself in. I would have killed myself. Sometimes I still think that might have been better. I had to sit there, waiting, while my daughter's body stiffened in the bathtub, her face turning blue in the water, while I waited for so long for the police to show up. Irene starts crying. James, is there anything else I should know? Irene, no, I would prefer if you left. James, thank you for your time. End of interview. That night, in my hotel room, was even worse. I got myself a bottle of vodka, just to take a little bit of the edge off this horrible experience. Yes, they are the topics I make my living off of, but this was different. This rattled me to my core. I lay in my bed, with my bottle of vodka, half drunk beside me. I stared at the wall, with the air conditioning unit as it hummed. Soon enough, I had to use the restroom. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. I was stuck on my bed, my eyes stuck on the room and the air conditioning unit. The lights had dimmed, and there was a presence in the air. It felt so hostile. I know what sleep paralysis is, so I did my best to ignore it. I knew that if I struggled, that it would only become worse. Sleep paralysis is scary precisely because your body goes into a panic when it realizes it is immobile. I wasn't going to let that happen. It had been a long couple of days, and I wasn't about to let my own imagination terrify me. He walked into my view, the Hat Man that I had heard so much about. He looked a little over 6 feet tall and had a lanky frame of a body that was covered with a loose-fitting charcoal suit. The suit was tattered and covered in brown stains. The man smelled like meat that had been left out for too long, and like sulfur. I could feel my eyes watering from the stench. I had never had a hallucination this vivid, none that I could remember at least. He paced back and forth in my line of view, and I lay there, terrified, trying my very best not to struggle. I didn't want to make things worse for myself. I knew that this must be all in my head. He walked out of my line of sight, and I thought maybe he had disappeared, that it was over. So I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was still stuck there, not knowing where the Hat Man was, if he was anywhere. This not knowing made my stomach want to explode. My heart pounded against my chest as if it were a cage, and it needed to get free. I could still smell the lingering rot, and I could feel my limbs aching. I wanted to move so badly at that point. I wanted to get away. If it was only my imagination, I was terrified of my imagination. The room seemed darker and like it was shrinking, and then a weight on my bed. I could feel someone, something, crawling into the bed next to me, an arm wrapped around me. I knew who it was. I knew it was the Hat Man. I could feel his labored breathing on my neck. I could feel his souped coat pressed up against me. I saw his hand, gray and scarred, clutching onto my chest. Some time later, I woke up. I don't remember falling asleep, but it was morning. I had one last interview to do. Some of me wanted to continue investigating this, but I would be lying if I didn't feel a terrible sense of dread, a sense that I was messing with things I had no business messing with. This suspicion was all the more confirmed when I arrived at the penitentiary. When I got to the front desk, I was informed that the woman I was to interview, Rachel Stafford, had hanged herself in her cell with a bedsheet the evening before. Was nobody watching her? I asked. She wasn't considered a risk, the officer replied. Well, did she say anything? No. Well, she did draw something. What? She cut her finger open and drew a picture of a. She drew. She drew a hat, didn't she? How did you know? Call it a feeling. That night was much like the previous night, and it wasn't any more pleasant. The putrid smell, the unwelcome visitor in my bed, it was all there. There was nothing I could do but hope it would go away soon. The only difference was that this morning I found a cut on my arm, 6 lines that made up a tiny rudimentary hat. There was no knife near me. I know that I couldn't have done this, whatever this Hat Man is. I have to believe in it now. I got a call today from my sister Jacqueline. Hey James, I need to come over right away. What for? I've been busy with this assignment. I know, she laughed. But I want to show you something. Show me what? I said. Show you what I did to my daughter. What did you do? I knew what was happening, but I didn't want to accept it. I wanted it to be anything else. What he told me to do, she said. What who told you to do? I yelled. You know who, silly, she said. Who? I demanded. I don't know if I really wanted the answer. The Hat Man. She hung up. That brings me to the end of Dead Time. Thank you for listening to the D.E.A.D podcast. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the D.E.A.D podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at the D.E.A.D podcast1 at gmail.com, or send me a DM on Instagram. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.